Hey everyone, welcome to the session. Hopefully you can hear and see me okay. Sorry, we've had a morning of technical issues to the point where I was like, I wonder if we should just cancel. Um, but we seem to be okay. So keep your fingers crossed. And I'm not even broadcasting live streaming to anywhere else because we couldn't even get the streams working. So anyway, let's just see what happens and spend as much of the morning together as we can, and then just take it from there. Uh, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me in this session. Uh, as always, technical issues or not, I'm honored to be with you here in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty. And I look forward to sharing time with you together in our shared sacred space today. So what we'll do today is we'll start as usual, we'll set our sacred space, and then we will talk about our overall topic for the month, which is how to realize your true nature. How to realize your true nature. There was some debate as to what the topic would be given the story Gary picked, but I think this is the right one. Anyway, when we get into the story, you can be the judge for that as well. We'll have our discussion after Gary's story, and then we'll close sacred space. Okay. So, so I'll go ahead and start the process of opening our sacred space now by saying that what we would like to do here together, our intention, is to, in the space of the next hour or two, to together create a space which is devoid of fear, threat, and control. In order for us to open to higher guidance from within our own selves, however we define that. Intuition, muse that guides us, other deities, flashes of intuition and insight. A safe sanctuary space for us all to relax and surrender with no feeling of danger or threat, so that we can partake of the nourishment, the emotional nourishment and the spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together as a group. In an opening sacred space today, I will propose, as I always do, that we follow the four principles of Presidian sacred space. Number one, confidentiality. So standard Vegas rules, what happens in sacred space stays in sacred space. Now online, of course, the stream is public, the replay will be public. So the way we do confidentiality online is via anonymization. If you would like to be anonymous, you don't have to be anonymous. If you would like to be anonymous, you would come into the crowdcast stream, you would go into the edit profile feature, change your username to whatever you want, and then continue participating or not as you like from there. The second principle, as much as possible to the best of our ability, we would like to maintain an environment where there is no threat, there is no controlling of each other, certainly with hostile feeling, but also with well-meaning, right? So we avoid as much as possible any forms of fixing or intervention or curing or tough love, right? This feeling of like, this is gonna hurt me more than it hurts you, but it's good for you, right? So whenever the wagging finger comes out, we try to refrain from the wagging finger, right, coming out. Not because it's bad per se, but because in this particular space, right, we are holding space for each other to be however we are. That's the point of creating the space, right? So like we go into a bank in order to sort of, get certain things done that we can only do in the protected space of a banking institution. So we don't, sort of wave weapons around in the bank, right? There may be a time and place for that elsewhere, but it's like the differences in space so that we can get specific things done. So here we're holding space for each other to be however we are, to be afraid, to be anxious, to be happy and relaxed, to be as we are, and then to be okay with that, to hold space for that with no judgment, no interference, and no intervention. The third principle, which is a corollary of the first two, is that there is no commerce in sacred space. So nothing may be sold. I can't sell you anything. Gary, my editor, who will be on screen in a moment, cannot sell you anything. Please refrain from selling things to each other in the chat. And that goes for recommendations as well, right? So even if there's a book by an author that I really like, and I'm receiving no compensation, financial compensation for promoting it, I will refrain from suggesting that author in response to someone's need or question, precisely because we're not here trying to fix anything, right? And when you come to me with a problem and I try to fix it with a suggestion, that is a form of control and also veiled threat leading to fear, right? In other words, if you don't read this book, if you don't buy this hair tonic, right, that I'm selling, you may not get the result that you want, right? Which is a kind of threat, not a hostile threat, but it's still a threat. And in sacred space, we try to keep the space clean of all of that, not because it's bad, but because there are certain things you can only get done in sacred space. We create it to get our stuff done, and then afterwards we can go back to commerce and recommendations as well. Okay. Said another way, we are here for your energy, not for the things you bring. We are here for what you are, not for what you do or provide. We're here for you, not your value add or functionality. And the fourth principle of sacred space, another corollary, is that there is no expectation of participation. So there's no pressure to do anything. You can stay in sacred space, you can leave, you can come and go as you please. It's true of my healing practice overall. Everyone comes and goes as they please, as they feel in their own sovereign feeling in the moment, what they want, what they need, what they don't. You don't have to chat. Okay, you can hear me, but you can't see me. No, I think it's just more crowdcast data technical issues. So hopefully you can still hear me. I just cycled. My Wi-Fi should be pretty good. I won't type in the chat. Hopefully you can still hear me. And let me know. Let me know if you cannot. Okay. All right, so that's weird. This has got to be a crowdcast thing. All right, at some point we may move off the crowdcast platform and this continues for another couple sessions, but hopefully you can still hear me. No, I'm not on Facebook because Facebook changed their settings and I can't get the stream working this morning. Okay, so some of you can see me. That's on. Okay, let's just continue. Hopefully, Gary, I don't know if you pulled the replay from the last few sessions we've done where we've had these visual issues on Crowdcast. And my question to you, you don't have to answer this now, is did the recording still come through anyway? So in other words, I can see myself. I'm wondering if Crowdcast can see me and is still recording and there's just some issue with the broadcast. Just a note for Gary, make a note of it. We can run it down later. Okay. So the last principle here is no expectation of participation. You can be on video or not on video. apparently, your video can be working or not. The audio can be working or not. Hopefully, after having done this for a couple of years now, even if all of this cuts out, and you find yourself alone, without this session, we cancel the session for a couple of hours. A natural question is like, would you still maintain your own sacred space for another half hour, alone in your room? I don't know. There's no right answer. It's just an interesting question that comes from all of this, I think. So again, no expectation of participation. There's no pressure to do anything. Again, the nourishment comes from the held space and your presence and attention from what you are, not from what you do or provide. and all of us together will tend to amplify that. Okay. So this is what I propose, and if you are not okay with that, in the next 30 seconds here, we will be crossing the threshold into our sacred space. So if you would prefer to not be in sacred space this morning, we'll pause right now just to give you a moment to withdraw from the group. Again, no expectation of participation. We'll still catch up with you later in profane space. We'll still hang out. We'll still be friends. No worries at all. But I'll just give everyone a moment to make your selection as to whether to stay or go. Okay. All right. And so for the rest of us now, we will now move forward together into our shared sacred space. And as we cross the threshold into our shared sacred space, I'll just remind everyone, myself included, that as much as possible in this space, we want to observe the 4 principles of confidentiality / anonymization, no fear, threat, or control, no tough love, no interventions, no commerce, recommendations, and no expectation of participation. All right. Welcome, everyone, to our shared sacred space. So our session topic for today is how to realize your true nature. How to realize your true nature. In this month's session, we came across a Greek myth that led us to reflection on how we tend to go off course and disconnect from our true nature, and how wounds of shame and prestige, validation seeking bring about this kind of self-betrayal in a way. So I'll have Gary come on screen, tell us about the story she selected, and then we'll follow the golden thread laid out by the story and see where it takes us today. So Gary, let's see if your video is working. You'll come on screen when you're ready.
Hi, Artie.
Hello. Welcome back.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
I can hear and see you okay. Can you hear and see me?
Yeah, your video's back, thankfully.
Okay. Great.
Weird. Right. Like talking to you over the phone with just the audio.
Okay. All right. So I'm trying not to feel any fear, threat, or control technically. But I'm wondering if we should just get moving with the session in case things cut out. So yes, please, would you tell us about the story you selected for this?
Yeah, so it's a classic Greek myth, and it's called, the story is called The Fall of Phaethon. Phaethon is Apollo's son, and it's a tragedy. I'll say that up front. And it's referenced in many works in ancient Greek writings. So, and depending on which author you're reading, it's he's named Phaethon or Phaeton. So there's variations of the names, and some of them reference just one or two things about Phaethon or just some incidents. But Ovid, in his Metamorphoses, goes into the entire detailed story of what happened with the whole story. So that's where I picked the story up from, because I wanted to kind of get the entire picture of what was going on in the story. So yeah, the fall of Phaethon, what we have today.
Okay. Will you tell it?
Yeah.
For us?
So let me start with, in Ovid's Metamorphoses, it's a huge collection of various stories, and they all spill over from one to another, right? So Phaethon's story starts where the story of Io and Zeus ends. So Zeus fell in love with a mortal Io, and then he had a child with her, and so that's the story ends there. And when the story of Phaethon begins, what we know is Epiphus, that's Io's son, is the same age as Phaethon. So, and they're friends. And so Epiphus is, he has a divine father, right? His mother is mortal, but his father is divine. And so at one time, Phaethon, his friend, told him proudly that, even my father is a god, and I'm Apollo's son. To which Epiphus was completely disbelieving. He said, "Oh, you must be mad to say that. I don't believe you." And Phaethon argued, "No, that's what my mother tells me. My mother told me that I am Apollo's son." And Epiphus still wouldn't believe. He said, "Oh, you're just mad to believe everything your mother says, right? And you just have an inflated image of your father. That's just nonsense." And Phaethon was embarrassed. He went red from shame, and then shame turned to anger. But, there's nothing he could do. So he just repressed his anger. And he went to his mother, Clymene, and said, I was embarrassed today. I was shamed today. And all I had to do is just, I didn't have an answer, so I had to stay quiet. And I'm really ashamed. So if I'm at all born of, divine stock, give me proof of my birth and let me claim my divinity. Right? And he begged his mother. And, his mother was distraught by this. And she said, "Well, I don't know how to say. I mean, I can swear on my own name. I can swear on my husband Merops's name, right? And forget that." And she stretched both her arms to the sky and said, "If I had to swear by Apollo's name, by that, brightness and, all of the light that lights up the whole world, I swear to you that you are the child of the sun, right? You are the child of Apollo. And if I'm lying, I swear, may Apollo never look on me again. And may this be the last light to reach my eyes. But, that's all I can say, right?" But having said that, it isn't too far for you if you had to go find your father's house. The place where he rises every morning is close to our land. So if you have it in your mind to, go ask him directly, I think you should. And this just excited Phaethon. He was delighted that she gave him this idea and permission to go find Apollo himself. And he imagined the heavens in his mind. And he immediately darted off and crossed Ethiopia, which was his land, right? And then crossed India. And with great zeal and enthusiasm, he reached the east where, Apollo rises every day. And he went to the palace of the sun. And it was everything he imagined and more, columns of bright gold and everything gleaming like fire, with shining ivory roofs and doors made of silver, and everything looked like a work of art. So it was a beautiful sight to behold. And as soon as, Phaethon stepped in, he entered the house of his, parent, which he still wanted to make certain at this point. He immediately went in and went into his father's presence. And he stopped some way off at a point where, he felt like he couldn't bear the light. He went too close and the light was just too bright. And wearing a purple robe, Apollo was sitting on a throne. The throne was shining with bright emeralds, and to his right and left, there were all these, celestial bodies, and there was day and month and year and century and hours and all of them, and seasons, spring and summer and winter and autumn. Everybody stood around him. And Apollo was seated in the middle. He looked at the boy, and the boy was still, soaking in the strangeness of everything that he was seeing. And Apollo asked him directly, "What brings you here? What are you looking for?" And he says, "What are you looking for, my son, that no father need ever deny?" And Phaethon says, "Well, Father, if you let me use that name, I want to make sure that my mother is not hiding behind false pretense. And I would like you to give me proof that you are my father and that I am your true son. And I want you to take away this whole uncertainty from my mind." And he said that, and his father removed this crowd of glittering rays that was kind of, pricking his son's eyes, took it away, ordered his son to come closer, and he embraced him. And he said, "There is no reason for me to deny that not only are you my son and you're worthy of my son, but that, your mother has told you the absolute truth. So you can just banish this doubt. You don't have to worry. And not only that, you can ask for any favor, and I can grant it to you." Right? "And everybody in my court is witness to my promise. So please ask for anything." And as soon as Apollo had said that, Phaethon asked for his father's chariot. And he said, "I want the right to control your chariot and your horses for a day. I'd like to ride your chariot for a day." And immediately Apollo regretted his oath. He shook his head and he said, I knew my words were rash and I was going to regret this. And if only I could retract my promise, but a promise is a promise. I can't take it back. But I confess that if I could just refuse you this one thing, you can have anything else. Right? And it is right that I'm begging you to reconsider, because what you're asking for is unsafe. Right? You ask too big a favor, and that's not suitable for your strength or your age or the fact that you're immortal. Right? You don't know this, but you aspire to have more than what the gods can handle. Even all the gods in Olympus cannot handle my chariot. There's nobody who can handle it. Right? And you want this for yourself, and you're simply not ready. Even Zeus, right? He can't handle my chariot. So what I'm asking is this, like, think about this, right? The whole journey that you take in a day with the chariot is that the first part of the track is very steep. And at dawn, when my horses set out, they can hardly climb. It's so steep. And then mid-heaven is where it's its highest, and you look down on earth. And sometimes when you see the earth and sea, sometimes even I am afraid and I start trembling. And the last part of the track is downwards and needs absolute control. And then even Tethys, the one who receives me in her waves, who is accustomed to this every single day. I go headlong into the waves and go down, and she is accustomed to this every single day. Even she trembles with fear. And so this is just the track that I'm talking about. And then the whole sky is constantly turning and dragging all the stars with it. And there's everything, every force of the sky that's against you. And you have to stick to your track. You can only imagine, you can only think of how great a power is involved in this. And even the slightest mistake can take the chariot off course and into the sky and into the deep realms of the sky that no one has ever even seen, right? And I see where you're coming from. And this is what Apollo says. I see where you're coming from. I know that you're asking for a definite sign to give you confidence that you are my son. And I'm giving you that sign right now by fearing for you and showing you my anxiety that only a father can have for a son. Right? If you can see this, you will see a father's concern. And then you look around you and all the riches that the world holds. And you can ask for anything from all of the good things in earth, sea, and sky, and I can refuse you nothing. This is the only thing I take exception to. Because what you ask for as reward is a punishment. Right? You're asking for a punishment. And I know how this is going to go. All I'm asking is you make a wiser choice. And so Apollo went on and on and on, and all of these words of wisdom, all of this appeal, everything, the warning and everything he said ended, and Phaethon still rejected his words, his warning, and he pressed his request. And he was just, taken by this, obsessed by this desire to drive the chariot. And so, because he'd been given the promise, he had earned the right, his father reluctantly then led the boy to the high chariot. It was made of gold. I mean, it was Hephaestus who made it for him. It was made of gold and, with gold rims and silver spokes. It was beautiful, and it reflected Apollo's own light. And as the brave boy, was just gazing in wonder at this chariot, right? And he looked at the whole sky. It was just overawed by everything. And the horses were yoked. The goddesses, stood by, led the team, opened the gates. And Phaethon just jumped onto the chariot, took possession of the reins, and he stood proudly, happily, and he turned to thank his father. And off he went. Now, Apollo's chariot was driven by 4 horses, and they, as soon as they heard the gates open, they whinnied and started off. But something today felt off to them. The chariot was too light. Right? It didn't hold the same weight as if Apollo would be there. And because of this, as they took off with their usual speed, the chariot started bumping up and down and, wheeling sort of wildly. And this terrified the horses. And they started to run faster than usual. And then this unlucky boy, he panicked. And he held on to the reins, even more terrified and even harder. And as he pulled harder, the horses started to run faster than ever, right? And then Phaethon made the mistake of looking down from the sky at the earth, and he completely grew pale. And his knees started to shake with fear. His eyes already with so much glare, of so much light, felt like he couldn't see anything. And at this point, panic had completely taken hold of him. He wished he had never touched his father's horses. He regretted everything. He regretted wanting to know his true parentage. He regretted, he didn't know what possessed him when he asked for this. Now, all he wanted is just go back home, be known as Meropes' son. Didn't matter if he was Apollo's son or not. He just wanted to go back to safety. And what was he even thinking, right? But what can he do? Now, much of the sky was behind his back, but there was so much more in front. It was like nothing he could do to measure how much sky he was looking at this moment. And he looked all around. It was like, Scorpio, the constellation Scorpio, it was like bending his pincers and threatening him. It was like on one side he sees the bull like threatening with his horns, and he's just absolutely terrified of where he's landed. And at this point, he doesn't even know if he's on track, right? The horses have completely thrown off the reins. They just going off on their own course, each in one direction. And the chariot is being just bobbed around all over the place. They're definitely not on track. And by now, Apollo had already warned him, the only way to do this journey of the day was to stick to the track. And that track was perfectly laid out, not too high, not too low, absolutely in the middle. That's what Apollo had said. If you just stay in the middle, everything is okay. Go a little too low, the earth will be scorched. Go a little too high, the heavens will get scorched. And right now, the earth started to get scorched, burnt. There were entire regions that turned into desert, right? And Ovid goes into great detail about how Ethiopia became really, really, scorched, and how Libya became a desert, and all of those details. But at this point, the earth couldn't take it, and she started to cry out. Rivers started to dry, forests were burnt out, right? So the earth started to cry out to Zeus. She said, "What have I done?" Right? What was it that I did that made me deserve this? This is not my fault. Tell me if I've done something to deserve complete destruction in this way, right? A complete ruin in this way. What have we done to deserve this? So if you think that I've done something wrong, okay, fine, just destroy me in one shot. But if I'm not guilty of any crime, you should come and intervene right now. You should help save us. And so as everything was collapsing, Zeus came out of, the highest summit of heaven, and he looked around and he was shocked. Something had to be done. And he looked at, the chariot and Phaethon, and he realized that was completely out of control. So he took his lightning bolt. He looked at Phaethon. Even Phaethon was scorched and was burning at this point. His hair was just, glowing flames at this point. And he hurled a lightning bolt straight at him. It left a long trail in the air and just struck him straight. And that's when Phaethon fell off the chariot and came falling down through the sky and fell right down into a distant, river, very far from his own country. So the river god Eridanus took him from the air, bathed his, smoke-blackened face, and then, buried him in a place right next to the riverbank. So that was the fall of Phaethon, and then it goes on where Apollo goes into immense grief and does not do his duty of his journey around the earth for one whole day as he mourns for his son. Right, so there is that part of the story, and it goes on, but Phaethon's story ends here in grief and total destruction. So that's the story. Artie, would you like to come back on? Hi.
Hello. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for reading that story for us. It's very moving to hear that story, especially even the second time. Let me start by asking my usual sort of beginning question, which is, so where do you enter into that story?
So when I read the story, right, there was always this feeling. I think a few sessions ago we did the story of Daedalus and the story of the labyrinth, right? And there is a part of that story where Daedalus has a son, Icarus, and to rescue him from the island where they were imprisoned, where the Crete, right? He builds these wings and they fly off. But unfortunately, Icarus kind of goes a little too high, and the wax melts and he falls into the ocean. So there is that episode.
Right.
The imagery, the metaphor, felt very similar to Phaethon when I read this. And the question that came to me was, so is this inflation as well? Right? So because how we read Icarus' story in that session was that, this is as we circumambulate in the labyrinth, right? We go deep into the underground and then we come back up again. And sometimes there is inflation. I mean, I'm sure you will go a little more deep into that when you, share your notes and thoughts on this. But my question was, okay, so is this the same metaphor that I'm encountering in this story? Is it the same thing? So what makes Phaethon ignore his father's wisdom? What makes Phaethon do what he did? So if that's come up again, I felt like, we might want to explore it a little more in detail, because in that session, Icarus' story is just a very tiny little detail in the overall arc of Daedalus' life, right?
Right.
So as we explored that, that was just one little detail. So I felt like maybe there is a little more to explore here. So that's how I picked the story. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Should I just go into what we discussed around inflation?
So is it inflation was what the question I had.
So the thing for me was that the Icarus story is different for me. Where I don't see the Phaethon story as inflation, I see it as like, we'll talk about that, but inflation for me is different in the sense of Icarus's case. It's a metaphor, right? It's all metaphorical. And again, the disclaimer, the way we read these stories is mythopoetic, where we regard every major actor in the story as a symbol of a different part of your own inner self, right? So Phaethon is a symbol of a part of you. Apollo is a symbol of a part of you. The chariot, the sun, all of it. And so for inflation with Icarus, there's this sense of you are touched with divinity. You have this power of flight, right? That you have been trained on. You're ready. You're prepared. But you have not fully seasoned in and fully grasped, right? So you go too far, and then you go outside of the middle path, and then your wings melt and you fall into the ocean and die in the story, but you fall back down into grief, into you go too far and then you fall back down, to use, I think it's a Jungian term, like the knight's journey again, right? And so, and you see this in spiritual development sometimes when someone, I mean, in the Buddhistic systems, in the Zen systems, you have this phenomenon where someone has basically had an enlightenment experience, but has not cooked the full context around it, right? So you feel this rush of divinity through you, right? Oneness with all of reality, but not to the extent where you fully lose your sense of yourself and separateness. So you feel separate and yet all powerful. So you become inflated, right? You think you're a god. You think you can leap from tall buildings, or tell everyone around you how to live their lives, which is kind of worse in some ways. But the point is, this is a phenomenon, right? It happens. It's just a part of life. Some seeds, when you plant them, fall on different kinds of surfaces, and it's not, it's just this happens sometimes. It's just a thing. So you have this feeling, and then you forget. You don't have the further realization that all of reality is in this state of enlightenment that you've experienced. That it's everything around you. It's the rock, right? It's the tree. It's not just you, whatever you even means. And as a result, you act, ironically, after this like sort of pseudo enlightenment. I mean, it is a full enlightenment experience, but you end up acting even more differentiated than everyone else around you. It's not just like, oh, I'm a separate dude with my own bank account and social security number. You have this enlightenment experience, and then you come out, and instead of fully acting in communion with the world around you, you act even more separate. You're like, I'm above you all. I'm a god, and you're all sort of slobbering, pathetic, unenlightened mortals. And the thing is, that state of affairs does not hold long either, just like with Icarus. Right? Icarus was flying like a bird. He didn't have the context of his specifics, so he thought he had full freedom and went too high. Right? So that's inflation, and that's different from the Phaethon story in my mind, because here the issue with Phaethon is actually the opposite. It's that he is not satisfied with his feeling of union with the divinity, right? Because asking whether I'm the son of Apollo is like seeking enlightenment. I mean, to use that, there are other metaphors we can use. Looking for your oneness with the ground of being, right? To use Buddhistic terms. Seeking, questing to see the Holy Grail unveiled, to have the experience of the beatific vision, right? Use Christian terms. And here the situation is he goes looking for his oneness with the ground of being, in this case, the divinity, right, represented by Apollo. And there's no drama. He walks right in. Apollo is holding his hand, patting his head, giving him a hug, and taking care of him, offering you everything, right? No challenge, no trials, no fire-breathing dragon, nothing. Just comes straight through you. So not only is he your dad, actually, not only does he recognize you and offer you everything, right? He misspeaks and offers you a little too much power. And you're like, well, I want to drive the chariot. And he's like, oh, crap, right? Even Zeus can't drive my chariot. Okay, he's my dad and he can't drive my chariot. I'm not shaming you. I'm just asking you, please don't do this, because it's not going to end well. I want to lose you because I love you, right? And so not only is he offering you everything, he is begging you on his knees and advising you and giving you wisdom. And none of this moves you, the Phaethon part of you, because you are that insecure. and unsatisfied, right? And that's not inflation. Inflation, like, it's like I get a little bit of hint that Apollo's my father, and I'm like, worship me, right? I belong on Olympus. And it's like, no, 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 no. That's inflation. Here, it's like Apollo is all but ready to take you up to Olympus, because you could be like, can I hang with you up on the mountain of the gods? And he's like, well, maybe not full time because that'll break some rules, but yeah, 9 months out of the year, come hang, drink ambrosia with us, right? We'll party. Even to that extreme, it's still somehow not enough, right? Put another way, it's enough for the gods, and it's still not enough for you as a mortal, right? And the question is, like, what is up with that? What is up with that? And so, this is not inflation. This is almost worse in a way, right? Icarus was definitely inflation. This is worse. This is more. This isn't even hubris. It's weakness. It's woundedness, right? And so, the reason here I read as Phaethon wanting more and more and more until it's too much. It's like when you're sharpening a knife with a sharpening stone, there's that point of like perfect sharpness. Then if you keep sharpening it beyond that point, it will start to get dull again, right? And so he definitely crosses this point. And the thing of like riding the chariot is that everyone can see you. Everyone on the earth and the heavens can see you. And it has, for me, this flavor of prestige seeking and validation seeking at that point, right? Where he has confirmation, first of all, from his mother. The mother should be enough, right? I swear upon, in full view of Apollo himself, that you are my son, and may he strike me down, etc., etc. That's already enough, and it's not enough. And he goes all the way. Apollo himself is like feasting him. And even that's not enough, because there is no sign quite yet that he can go back, take back to the playground, right? Where the demigod son of Zeus is waiting, to kind of rub that in his face. And that's where it goes too far, because it's not about whether you are the son of Apollo anymore, which is the ground of reality. It's what sign you can take back, frankly, to the world of the profane, right? To win this kind of cheap validation on the playground, right? And that's the thing that does him. And so this failure / weakness is, in a way, a failure to recognize your true nature, right? Where your true nature in the form of Apollo is literally staring you in the face, is literally telling all his court ministers, this is my son and I love him, right? So that's it, you got it, you're done. But you also try to look for an externally prestigious sign as well, right? And at that moment, when you try to get the sign of the thing, you lose track of the thing itself. Okay. Now, there's a number of different ways we can take this. And I guess the way it came up when I was in, our brainstorm session with Gary, is that when you do go too far, you lose the actual thing, right? You already have Apollo, and you ask for the sign that goes too far, and that makes you lose your Apollo-ness. I mean, even in death, he's still the son of Apollo, but you can't enjoy all the pleasures that will bring, right? Because you've gone too far and you've lost this manifestation. There, and there is something here that calls to mind, phenomenon around enlightenment, or the phenomenon that people refer to as enlightenment, where in the state itself, right, when you have the direct perception of your, I can't even put word, when you have the direct perception of this fact, there's nothing to show, right? There's nothing to discuss. It's not something you could put into words, not because you're being coy, but because it is its intrinsic nature is wordless. It is the direct thing and experience. It is not the sign of the thing, right? So there's this, and then there's pen, which is the sign of the thing, P-E-N, or the sound pen, pen, pen. That is itself its own thing. The sound, the squiggles on paper, spell out pen, that point to the actual reality. Right? And when you have grasped the actual reality itself, to go back to using the sign to point to it diminishes your grasp of it. Right? You have abstracted away from it. So anyway, long story short, there's nothing to discuss, there's nothing to put into words. And that actually is the mark. True mark is silence. That's why in some circles, and I am of the school of thought, silence is the teaching, right? Silence is the pointing to the true nature of enlightenment. And silence is everywhere, right? And that is almost the point. But again, it's like saying a drop of water is the nature of the whole ocean, but it's hard to say that to a fish, where it's like, what are you talking about? Water. And so there's a point at which you lose your power, you lose your ability to swim in the waters of enlightenment, swim in the waters of divinity, to enjoy your existence, the reality that you are Apollo's son. Okay. And the thing that separates you from this is this quest for validation, affirmation, and prestige. Okay. So me, knowing Apollo is my father on the good word of my mother, it's not that he doesn't believe her, it's just not enough. So I go to Apollo's palace, and he welcomes me. He doesn't have to test me. He's like, yeah, you're your son. Like, guards just let him through. He just walks right into the throne room. Why is that? Right? Why is that? It's because this is your home. Okay. But even that is not good enough. The world has to have a sign as well. I need to show off that Apollo is my father, and that's when you lose it. Right? The prestige thing, the point of when we talk about need, want, and desire, the overbearance of the want and soothing and numbing the pain of the shame literally on the playground with Phaethon's friend completely tramples over the jewel of the actual reality of you are his son. You just proved it. And your father, Apollo, is sitting right there holding your hand, and you're still not satisfied. Right? So want trampling on desire and ultimately need as well. And again, not to harp on this, right? But the enlightenment example is like the experience of enlightenment is not enough. I need to be confirmed by a master, which is total BS, and the masters know that too. And then after I'm confirmed, I need to tell everyone I've got a new name and I've got this certificate that shows that I've achieved this. And the more you do that, the more you lose the state. Not because it's a punishment or someone's actually even in a more hidden way testing you, but it's the physics of the state itself, right? The more you have to tell everyone, the more you have to control the circumstances under which people have enlightenment experience, or even build a new device that you strap onto your head to like get people to the state without meditation, the more, in my opinion, you lose. And if you don't understand this, right, as just as before, there's nothing to say, right? If you are sitting with Apollo in the middle of a feast in your honor, and you still want to be like, how do I set up tours of Apollo's palace so I can make some money on the side? And it's just like, it's just, there's just nothing to say at that point. Right? You just let him get on the chariot. It's like, I don't know, there's nothing to do. What do you do in that situation? And so the betrayal here, like on the epitaph of his, I don't think Gary said this, but on his tombstone, Gary, when you come back on, you can read that part. But when she read the story to me, she was like, on tombstone, it was something like he was filled by his own weakness, right? The epitaph for Phaethon, or betrayed by his own weakness.
Yeah, it was I forgot to read that part actually when I narrated it. So when the river Eridanus kind of, builds a tomb for him, that the words that he inscribes on the tomb is, "Here lies Phaethon, the boy who dared all, but by weakness was betrayed."
Right.
So that's the words he inscribed.
So to me, the betrayal of his weakness is that he loses the actual power and joy and delight and pleasure during his life of being Apollo's son.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is your weakness is needing to know it and know it and know it, even though you already have it and you are it.
Yeah.
And to the point where you can show it to other people. So the more you push to know it and grasp it, the less you actually have it. The more you fetishize it, the more you lose the power of the state. Right? You can't actually lose the state of enlightenment or being Apollo's son, because it is what you are, not what you do. It is what you are, not what you show. That's why in sacred space we always say, we're here for what you are, your essence, not for what you do, not for the value add you bring, not for the function you provide. Right? It's like coming back to the essence of what you are. So even in death, Phaethon is still Apollo's son, but now he's dead, so he can't really enjoy the pleasures of being Apollo's. That is the betrayal to me of weakness. So like in healing, right? It's sometimes hard for someone to feel, they have a breakthrough, like, oh my gosh, I realize I've been like doing this to myself. And when it's not like, it's like what I was saying about enlightenment, it's just a different metaphor. It's hard for them to feel full relief and the delight of their healing until someone outside of themselves comes along and confirms it. You get a certificate, you get someone saying, oh yeah, I've seen a lot of other cases, you're like A++, right? And they have to talk and talk and talk about how they feel good. You have to show the world on Instagram how great you're feeling now, right? You have to name it and concretize it. And then the next step beyond concretizing it is to be able to trade it in the profane world. Right. And as a result of doing all that, you lose it. You over sharpen the blade, and the blade becomes dull again. And not just healing with bliss too. The more you talk and brag about your bliss, the more it fades.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is not punishment. Right? It's like, oh, you better not talk about your bliss. It's just the physics of the thing. When you over sharpen a knife and it becomes dull, the knife is not punishing you. Right? It's just the physics of the steel and the sharpening stone. Right? So I'm not laying this out as like you better be a good person. It's like I'm just laying out the physics of it. And you can use it to your advantage. You can like, well, I want to hold the knife for whatever reason and then resharpen it again. I don't know. But in enlightenment, in healing, in bliss, you see this all the time. And again, it's not like you're weak and you're a bad person, you better not be like Phaethon. It's like we are all like Phaethon. We've all done it. It's a thing. Right? It's a thing. People who like are spiritually ambitious and they want to develop and raise their consciousness and vibration, they're so looking to the outside for that. It's hard for them to actually perceive when they've reached a certain point. And then they look for outside confirmation because they can't tell. And then, yeah, they lose the state again for whatever period they have it. And what I'm saying is that is a phenomenon that is perfectly normal, that happens to everyone. And if it has happened to you, that's not the end of the story anyways, but just, just keep going. Everything's going to be all right. Just keep going. Another way of saying it, discussion about the thing is not the thing. Yeah. So actually, I had another note here. Okay, let's just keep going. Gary, did you have anything to add at this point?
So when you said this is the part that struck me in the context of healing, right?
Yeah.
You said the more you seek, that feeling in order to get validation or soothing, right? Then you start to kind of lose that feeling, and you don't feel as good anymore. And in the context of healing, it makes so much sense for me because, we've discussed the three different kinds of motivation, right? The three kinds of will, which is need, want, and desire. And we've said that in sacred space that we're not saying that need and want, because, there's profane involved in getting those things met. We're not saying that they don't have a place. All we say is need, want, and desire. All three are valid, and you decide the ratio of how much of your time and energy will be in pursuit of your needs, and how much of it will be in pursuit of wants, and how much of it would you want to use to pursue your desire, your true desire, right? And as we say that, the feeling that at least I took away from that was that, oh, it's okay, if I do like 90% of want, like 5% of need, and just keep 5% of for sacred, the desire, it's all right. And we still say that it is all right, but it struck me that what then changes, how that dynamic brings about is that when want becomes the most dominant part of everything that you do, it really just, like in Phaethon's metaphor, right?
Yeah.
Not only is your desire kind of suppressed, like you don't even realize what your true desire is. Like Apollo says, ask for anything you want. What do you really want? And you don't know the answer to that. You're not even thinking about it, right? But also your needs, basic survival, also gets trampled on, like you said. Like you don't even exist anymore. Like you're a mortal threat. You're a mortal threat to yourself. And we see that in say, for instance, addictions and very, very deep wounds that hurt so bad that you want to soothe so much that you forget to eat, you forget all the things that you need to basically take care of yourself to even exist as a healthy, functioning person. Many more examples, but that's what came to me. Like your needs get trampled, your desire anyway gets trampled first, before anything else. And that just goes completely off course. So that's what struck me. Like I can choose,
even in relationships.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I can choose whatever ratio that I want, but yeah, I mean, if want kind of takes over, then I don't think I'll be in a state where I can even step back and say, hey, I think we need to recalibrate. It just completely goes off course. That's the feeling I got.
Yeah, I mean, your example of addictions and not eating and self-harm and all that, I mean, that's definitely valid, right? But for me, I was like, you don't even need to go that far. It's like, even in relationships, being in a relationship with someone who, you don't feel enthusiasm for, desire, you feel suppressed, being in a job where it is not your bliss, right? So basically, it's like living a life where you're managing all your decisions driven by want part, where you're just trying to avoid the pain of your wound being poked. Right? You're playing defense your whole life. You're just trying to like not be humiliated again, like Phaethon in the schoolyard.
Yeah.
Right. And all these other questions of well, what do I need? Maybe I can still do those on autopilot, but what do I desire? Right? The delights of life, beyond just not being in pain anymore, are completely lost, right? They're not accessible. Right. From my notes here, it's like we had written, like, what is even the point? Be like, I want everyone to know I'm Apollo's son. I want to make sure I'm Apollo's son. What is even the point of being Apollo's son, a son of Apollo? If when he's sitting with you one-on-one in the middle of his court with all eyes looking and holding your hand and trying to give you advice and wisdom, you're not even going to listen to him, right? And it's like he said, you can ask him anything. And the one thing you ask for is this prestige thing, which he has already identified in the story. Yeah, this job where I have to drive the chariot across the sky every day, it's the shittiest job I have. Right? It's extremely prestigious that everyone sees me as, oh, Phoebus Apollo, right? The bringer of light. But it's the shittiest job. And it's like that vibes with real life for me because all the shittiest jobs are the most prestigious, right? The president of this, the prime minister of that, the CEO of this, the founder of that. Like these are deeply unpleasurable jobs and roles. And that's why we have to keep prestige on it, because we have to compensate you somehow to convince you stupid enough to like do this job, right? And so clearly, and this is the weakness, the priority for Phaethon is prestige. He comes into his father's house with no questions and only demands. Right? I just want what's coming to me. I want to prove. I want that you have no questions for. I mean, I know he's your father, but still, he's Apollo. Right? He is the Lord of the Muses. He is the Lord of prophecy, the Lord of healing, the Lord of music, the Lord of action at a distance, the far shooter, the bringer of plague, right, and healing, the brother of Artemis, right? So your auntie is the goddess Artemis. He is the son of Zeus. So, and you have no questions for him. Okay. Other than like, I want to drive your Tesla, right? I have no questions for him other than that. Okay. It's his weakness, and it is heartbreaking. Right? And this is why I was like, this is not inflation. He's not pumped up with the fact that he's Apollo's son and going too far. It's the opposite. He's like, even whatever I show you, enlightenment experiences, all these things, you're still not convinced. Even the emotional wound of like not knowing your true dad. Now your dad wants to hang out with you, wants to play catch with you, wants to go fishing with you, and you don't even want to do that. Right? So this is a level of imbalance that will not remain uncorrected for long. when you have fever of 104, it's like that will not remain. You will either heal or you'll die. It's not going to stay 104 forever. So you ask your inner Apollo anything, and all you ask for is proof and prestige, but because of the pain and shaming. The alternative. So it's like, what's the alternative? What else would you do? You could say, you could ask all these questions and learn about the world and delight, right, in the insights and downloads of divinity, the visions of life it will give you, understanding your bliss. But also you could be like, just knowing you're my dad is enough. I have no questions. If you need me for anything, let me know, because you sired me for a reason, I presume, right? But just knowing who I am, I don't even need to tell anyone. Right? Someone asks, "Are you a son of Apollo?" You're like, "I don't know. I have no comment." No. But you know. Right? And that's enough. Another way to ask this question would be to say, what if you weren't the son of Apollo? Right? What then? I mean, most of us mere mortals are not sons of Apollo, and I don't think I'm a son of Apollo. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't asked. I haven't cared to ask, right? But I feel like I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay, right? And so, yeah, this thing you say about need, want, and desire, want canceling everything else out, want trampling on everything else out. I want to bring this back to healing and this point about realizing your true self. So when we say how to realize your true nature, right? You can realize it or you don't realize it. Your true nature is still unchanged. Right? It doesn't matter. Like, so to me, it doesn't matter in the end whether you realize your true nature or not. Because whether you realize it or not, you are what you are. Whether Phaethon believes it or not, he is a son of Apollo. Right? When you go too far in doubt, then you kind of lose some privileges through the physics of it. The knife is not sharp anymore, so you can't use it to have all these delights and pleasure in life. But that happens sometimes. It's just a thing. But the deeper thing, weakness here, is that when you allow the pain of your want drive you toward validation, affirmation, and prestige, and that tramples on the desire, the bliss of your true nature, of the fact that you are Apollo's son or child. The most heartbreaking part of this for me is that it is a profound form of self-betrayal. Right? Phaethon's act, above all, is an act of self-betrayal. Right? And so for me to translate this, when you seek emotional validation, affirmation, confirmation from outside of yourself, through relationships, finding new relationships, staying in unhealthy relationships, through seeking money and prestige, through spiritual ambition, progress, spiritual development, higher consciousness, raising my vibration. When you seek these things driven by the desire for emotional validation, in other words, to validate yourself that you are worthy. Right? I want to realize my full spiritual consciousness. Why? So that I know I'm a son of Apollo. Okay. So we all do that to a certain extent, but there's a point at which you cross the line and you actually self-betray and you get on the sun chariot. What is this self-betrayal? It is, at the end of the day, to over strive for validation, approval, and affirmation. When you overdo it, it is self-betrayal because it means that you do not think you are worthy. Right? You do not think you are worthy. And that is the ultimate self-betrayal. Because if you don't back your own self, what is there to talk about? Right? If you're not going to invest in your own company, who cares if anybody else invests in your company? Right? The thing is rotten at the core. Right? So when you do not think you yourself are worthy, and you know this because if I thought I was worthy, I wouldn't need to be asking everyone, my mother, Apollo, everyone else, whether I'm worthy or not. Right? It's like when you need to confirm your experience with a master to know that you're enlightened. It's like, well, you may have had an interesting experience, but you weren't able to grasp it for very long. Because here you are in the meditation hall trying for another test. Like, what are you doing here? But the fact that you even showed up is the result of the test. Right? So the want, trampling, bliss, and needs, why else would you pursue want-based things? Affirmation, prestige, validation, to the point where you lose bliss. And to the point where, like an addiction, in some cases, you lose need. In some cases, you lose your life. What could be so poisonous and painful that it would lead you to lose both of those things? It's the idea or the inkling that you are actually not worthy. Right? And if you think that, if someone were able to convince you of that, they're convincing you to self-betray. Right? I mean, so I'm not saying there's anything wrong with pursuing spiritual development or happy relationships or money and prestige. Right? I like money and prestige just fine. But it's that if it's driven by this intrinsic feeling of unworthiness, which is a wound which can be healed, right? That's kind of what we do here, right? But if you didn't have that feeling of unworthiness, you would just do your thing, right? Need, want, and desire would all just be balanced. There would be no urgency. Oh my gosh, I have to get this done. There would be no steely-eyed determination to go on this quest and mission in life. Because why do you need to be steely-eyed, right? If you weren't to prove something that you worry might not be right. It's like a tied game. It's like who's going to score the last goal to win. You don't know. Whereas if you knew you're worthy, it's like we don't even need to play the game. We know we're better. There's no need to prove it. Right. So if you felt you were worthy, you would just do your thing. You would pursue your bliss. You would meet your needs. You would meet your wants. No big deal. Just like you grow carrots or do the dishes or fold the laundry. No drama. Because nothing is unknown. Right? But when you feel unworthy at the core, then everything you do, walking to the car, chewing gum, paying your taxes, everything becomes a litmus test or a numbing soother. Right? You have so much Apollo, and yet it's still somehow not enough. You need to drive the chariot too, which is actually not fun. He's literally like, dude, this is not a boon. This is a punishment. I don't know why you're asking for this. And in some versions of the story, it's so that he can be up there and wave to like his friend in the playground and be like, ha, see, I'm going to show you. Right. But again, the feeling of worthiness. What if you were not Apollo? So what? So are you not worthy to like exist because you're not the son of an Olympian? Right? Where is the actual threat? So to say it again, because this I think is an important point. When you seek emotional validation, affirmation, prestige through relationships, money, prestige, spiritual ambition, progress, higher consciousness, all of it, in order to validate yourself that you are worthy, this is an act of self-betrayal, because it means that you do not actually think you are worthy. And I'm asking you to not do this. I'm suggesting that you are worthy without condition. It doesn't matter what we're in secret space. It doesn't matter what you do, whether you participate, ask questions, follow the principles of sacred space or not. You are worthy without condition. Your self-esteem is unconditional, right? And if you're like, well, I don't really believe this, is Phaethon riding the chariot, even against the advice of bliss, even against the advice of your true nature, Apollo. Right? And if you do not think you are worthy to the point that you need something outside of yourself to prove it, not even to your classmates on the playground, but to prove it even to you inside, because you don't think you're worthy, then you're kind of screwed. Right? Because even if you are not willing to back yourself, then where are you? But if even Apollo thinks you're worthy, but you don't think you're worthy, it's like, well, what do we do? I don't know what to do from there. So in spaces like sacred space, when we do retreats in like Greece, we'll probably do a like Bali or Paris retreat in the spring. And when we do healing, right? These are the kind of things we try to do to remove that feeling of fear, threat, and control, where we try to reveal the underlying reality, like excavating an ancient city is one of the images we use in the Bliss program. Like the city is already there, we're just slowly excavating it to find the throne room, find the treasury of our bliss, right? Things that we excavate are things like your wounds are not your fault. You got them in childhood, you were 6, so you had no control. So your wounds are not your fault. But these wounds that you got that are not your fault make you do seemingly stupid things, like get in relationships with the wrong people, follow the wrong job for like decades upon decades, and speaking in nasty ways to yourself internally. Okay. But even so, right, you are not stupid. Everything you do, even the seemingly self-harming things, you're not stupid. There's a reason where it makes sense in your mind that you do these things, where you soothe and shield and do all these things that we talk about in the healing program. And you decide your life, right? Precisely because you are worthy and you are sovereign. It's like, oh, I had a horrible childhood and I made all these bad decisions that led to even more suffering. And it's like, yeah, you decided all that because you are sovereign. The wounds are not your fault. It's just what you had, right? 2 eyes, 2 ears, nose, and a mouth. It's just what you have. And you made perfectly rational calls and decisions based on that initial position, based on that initial hand that was dealt to you. And you got to make those calls because you are sovereign, and you are sovereign because you are worthy. It's one and the same. Right, so eventually we get to the state of, it's not your fault, you're not stupid, and you are the sovereign of your life, no one else. Right, terrible formula for starting a cult, by the way. I'm like teaching people, it's not your fault, you're not stupid, and you are the sovereign of your life. So it's, I'm not going to be able to control anyone if that's what I'm teaching. And so once we get to that point, then you sit there in the state of, it's not my fault, I'm not stupid, and I'm the sovereign of my life. So you sit there in this state of like, not having to rush around urging to do anything because it's not my fault. I'm not stupid and I'm the sovereign of my life. So you end up in this state of kind of sacredness, in this state devoid of fear, threat, and control. And the theory, anyway, is that in this protected hothouse, greenhouse, that you have constructed for yourself on your own sovereign power. I didn't do it. I'm just the advisor. I'm like showing you blueprints and like, 3D models, and you're the one building it. So we build this protected hothouse, devoid of fear, threat, and control. And then we see what grows from there, what sprouts from that soil. We don't know. And if you're 70, it's like, we don't know. It's like, well, let's find out. Plenty of time. There's always plenty of time. What grows out? What is your bliss? What is your vector? What is your meaning and purpose in life? And we figure out what it is. It's like carrots, it's cucumbers, whatever. And then we kind of look at it and we're like, nice, didn't know that. And then we proceed from there. But under your own sovereign power and vision. And for me, it always turns out okay. Right? When you do it that way, it always turns out okay. Okay, so let's see, a couple last points here just on the notes. And Gary, jump in anytime. So at one point we say, just to make this point, this could be read as a moral, allegorical, cautionary tale, where it's like, you better realize your true nature, you better accept, not ask for too much, don't ask for too much proof, or else you'll be like Phaethon. But again, we're reading this mythopoetically. So Apollo and Phaethon are both aspects of your own inner self. Okay, so Phaethon dies, it just means he transforms. Right, your master hasn't died, Apollo's still there. And Phaethon, the Phaethon part of it went too far, yes, but there is no threat. There is no, you better not be like Phaethon. This story is telling us a part of you, or all of you, will be like Phaethon. You will be unsatisfied even though your bliss is staring you in the face. And you will push too far. And you will get on the chariot and you will screw yourself. Okay. And that is okay. It will eventually come back into balance. And after a couple of rounds of that, then you decide under your own sovereign power. Maybe I'll hang with my dad Apollo for a week before I get on the chariot and just see how it feels. Just try something different. And that's okay. It's not your fault. You're not stupid and you're sovereign. Decide at any point, only if you want, to try something different. What I love about this is that it's Zeus that comes and throws the lightning bolt. Right, where Zeus is the dad of Apollo here, right? Zeus is this. I actually have a Zeus with a pendant on me right now. Zeus is the overall father, king force, the executive function, if you will, that both contains the Greek universe, he has created the Greek universe. This is a part of you, right? And keeps it in balance and keeps the generation going. Right? He's known in Greek society, popular cultures, he's sleeping with all these goddesses, he's cheating on Hera, but these are all parts of it. Right? It's like the Zeus part of you is like spending time with Maya and giving birth to Hermes, right? And Hermes is absolutely a critical part of the Greek pantheon. Or he sleeps with Coronus and gives birth to Asclepius, my patron god, right? It's like we wouldn't have wanted that to not happen, right? And so these are all different parts of you. So sex, in the sense that poetically, is a form of generation, creation, and powerful manifestation, which is why sex is so pleasurable, so scary because of its power. You're creating new bonds, you're creating new life. But Zeus does it in a way which keeps things more or less balanced, and that is the role of king power within you, right, regardless of your gender. Containment, blessing, and the ability to go into grief. which we can talk about at some point in the future. So how to realize your true nature at the ultimate level, right? And this goes back to the Buddhistic sort of enlightenment experience as well. You understand you are the son of Apollo. You understand you are the ground being. Said another way, you are a part of the world and reality. You belong here. You belong here. You have a vector, you have your bliss that you can discover and pursue only if you want. No fear of control. If you don't want, you don't want. You are the sovereign. So whatever you want. Because of your true nature, you do whatever you want. If you do something that feels off in hindsight, there was a reason. Not because you're stupid. There's a wound, you're trying to soothe the wound, whatever it is. As advisors around here, we try to help you find the reason. Then once you're aware of the reason, then you make your decision, what you want to do forward. And that's it. If you need additional proof or reassurance, we can help with that. But doing too much, asking for a certificate, asking for like, I passed, I've got the stamp of approval from Artie and Gary, that will start to serve kind of a different purpose, which is more prestige and soothing, and we tend to hesitate in the face of that. But if you do persist, you're like, well, if you're not going to certify me, I'll find someone else to certify me. Right? It will eventually self-correct. I see this as a feature of your circumambulation, not a flaw, because everything eventually comes back into balance.
It's also telling, I think, that the story kind of ends at a point where, everyone actually goes into a grief cycle. Like we don't touch on that, and we don't go into detail because it flows into, like the epic that the Metamorphosis is. It just goes on and on. But when the story ends, Phaethon's father Apollo goes into a grief cycle. His mother goes into a grief cycle. His sisters go into a grief cycle. So all of these things happen, and they all. I mean, Apollo, we don't know, but all of his family kind of transform through grief. So that those imagery come up. So it's quite telling that as Zeus strikes his lightning bolt, trying to bring everything back into balance, and as Phaethon himself, dies and goes through a transformation cycle, instantly everything plunges into grief. So then grief itself, and we've explored this theme, so I'm not going to go into that, but that itself is a whole circumambulation cycle, and then there is transformation through that. So, and everything is fine again.
Yeah, I love that. And we had said there's no exercise.
I was going to say, I can't even imagine what exercise we would do.
Well, I think during our talk, I was getting really punchy on this point, and I was like, there's no exercise. And the fact that there is no exercise is the exercise, because there's no more to say. Right. Because there's no more. You don't need any more proof. You don't need any more exercise because of the nature of the points we're making here.
Right. So I was just going to point out that as I logged in today, I noticed there's a question, right? That's supposed to, and you had asked for, you'd invited questions in the earlier sessions as well, so that we can do maybe a Q&A session at some point.
Right.
And have that. So we have one question right now. So if you want to mention that, and then maybe at some later stage we do a separate session for those. How would you want?
Possibly. Yeah.
I
mean, I think I read this question. It's just first of all, I love that people are asking questions, but some of them will go a bit deep, like question Bob asked, we could do a whole session on that around. I don't know, just intergenerational curses that we carry in the modern world. That I'm not even sure I'm ready to fully talk about as much. But ask questions and it'll help everything percolate, and the answers will come up at one point or another, and I'm sure one form or another.
Okay, so we also have a comment regarding, the video going in and out.
Yeah.
Because of too weak a signal. So maybe Crowdcast is kind of compensating for a weak signal or something like that. That's how I'm reading it, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that.
The other thing is, I wanted to ask you to link back to the Tao Te Ching talk, because I think we've talked about sort of nature of reality. And I think the Tao Te Ching talk would be relevant here for people to sort of reference back to.
Yes, that was a whole session on, the Tao Te Ching and what is meant by nature of reality. So I've just given the YouTube link for it in the comments.
Okay, great. Cool. Yeah. All right, anything else?
Yeah, I think, it started off when I read the story and it felt very heavy. And even when I shared it, it was mostly sadness. And I felt that grief that Apollo goes into and everyone else goes into, right? I mean, so it was quite intense. But having discussed this, I feel like one, a kind of assurance, I can say, but also that, there is a little more clarity, at least for me, that there is a dynamic between need, want, and desire, and what happens when the balance is a bit skewed, right? And it will be interesting to see it from that perspective and to keep an eye on how it all happens in the inner world on a daily basis, like as we go about in our daily lives, assessing what part of what we do is motivated by need and what part of it is by want, and how much are we tapping into our desire. And it'll probably be a kind of interesting exercise to just observe and see what happens. What's the dynamics between them? Yeah.
I like that. So there is an exercise.
Yeah, I mean, I was just making a mental note for myself and thinking, maybe I'll do that.
I like that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So should I close the session?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so I'll go ahead and close the session now. We're near time, and the next session is next month. Let me put up the link here for everyone. Feel free to sign up now, post questions, invite friends, only if you want. Okay, and I'll go ahead and close our sacred space as well. So I hereby close the session of our shared sacred space. Thank you for sharing this space with us and holding this space with us. And thank you for both generating and sharing in the nourishment, the emotional nourishment and the spiritual nourishment in our shared sacred space. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of fear, free of threat, and free of the undue control of others. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, have a great month, and I will see you all in the next session. Thank you.